Welcome to Hye Roots, Descendants of Ararat. I am George Ajayan, your host for the first series devoted to Armenian genealogy. Today, Camille Andrus from Family Search is again joining us. Hi, Camille.
Hi, George.
Last time, you shared with us some basic search functionality and examples of Armenian metric book and repatriation records. This time, we would like to delve deeper into a few additional areas. Having worked with these records pretty extensively, are there other tips you can offer, other things to expect from both the baptism or marriage or even funeral records?
Absolutely. So one thing to keep in mind is that they're not going to be using fixed surnames a lot of the time. So frequently you're going to be having a child in a baptism record, for example, and it will only give their given name. And then it will give the names of both of their parents as well. But the child's name isn't going to be explicitly given most of the time. So there are just a few rare exceptions, but most of the time you're not going to have that. So what you're going to be having instead is you're going to find them using their patronymic name instead of a fixed surname like we use today. So for example, if the child is Hye Roots and his father is Simon, then he would be Hye Roots Simonian, right? So even though his father is Simon, Sargsyan, the child is not going to get the Sargsyan surname. They're going to be using the patronymic instead, so based on the father's given name. And so when you're searching these records, you're going to have to be careful of, keeping track of who's who, because they're not going to be using the fixed surname.
Maybe it would be good to talk a little bit now also about the wiki pages and how they can be used to help find information, not just records, but also other useful and helpful tips for Armenian genealogists.
So to access the Family Search Wiki, we can come to Search, and then we're going to come to Research Wiki. So on here, we have the option to choose either the modern country, or sometimes we can use older historical jurisdictions. So for example, we can type in Armenia, and it will bring us to our main Armenian genealogy page. So this is going to be focused, again, primarily on the modern area. And it will have some various things that are overlapping with some of the other pages. So for example, if you come to the church records page, you'll see that there's some tutorials on how to read the records, but then there's also instructions on how to use these to find records in the catalog, for example. And then if they're not cataloged fully, you can also find tips on how to still locate the records, but it's going to be more of a browse experience as you kind of go through to find them. But for these, I would say the most important ones are actually the more historical focused pages. So if we come to, for example, Erevan Gubernia religious records. Okay, so remember that this particular area was incorporated into the Russian Empire. And within the Russian Empire, a large portion of it was part of the Erevan Gubernia or Erevan Governorate, or basically that's just meaning a province or like a state. Okay, that can help when you think about it in terms of that. And so within this area, this is how they're going to be organized. So again, this is covering many of the same areas as we were just looking at, but it's helpful to look at them in terms of this, because the records that you're looking at are going to be called according to these jurisdictions and not the modern ones. So it can help you kind of stay grounded in where you are geographically. So for example, if we come to this page, we can see that there's a background on, okay, here's what you see in a typical baptism record for the Armenian Apostolic Church. And so these column headings are not necessarily set in stone. They will change from parish to parish or from, time to time. However, this will give you a good idea of the types of things that you're going to find in them across this whole area. Okay. And then, so you have that and along with examples for Armenian Apostolic ones, as well as the Armenian Catholic Church records as well. So these are going to be formatted differently because these are going to be more paragraph style type records than the Armenian Apostolic records. But again, they'll still be in Armenian, so that shouldn't be an issue as long as you know how to do that. And then, of course, there's other religious minorities as well in this same area. So you can see records about that. And then another great page is the taxation page. So again, like we were talking about earlier, the Kameralnaya Opisania, for example, and the Posmeni Spiski, these are the tax lists kept by the Russian government, so the Russian Empire government, to keep track of the people and to tax them accordingly. So some of these have been indexed as well. So again, if you go to search, records, and then Armenia taxation or Armenia tax lists, you'll be able to type in the name of someone, and if it's been indexed, it will pop up in the results. However, if you want to also search for them in a browse fashion instead of just typing in someone's name and trying to find it that way, then you can also come to this. Now, this is a work in progress. This list is by no means complete, but if your town happens to be listed, it can be really helpful to see all of your assorted tax years for one location in one spot. Because as you look at these records, you're going to be able to say, okay, they're in household 5 on the 1886 tax list, and then it gives you a clue that in the previous tax list they were household 7, okay, for example. Then you can go to that previous tax list and say, oh, okay, now I'm going to go and find them really fast on that specific entry, right? And then you can track them very quickly through the lists and then use the church records to kind of fill in the gaps. So I find that it's really helpful to, if you have enough information, to jump into these first to build out the skeleton of the family, the framework, and then use the church records to verify and fill in. So using them both together is really powerful.
The tax registers that you just spoke about, I think it would be very helpful to show how they can be used to supplement and to help as a foundational item for finding additional information about a particular family. Maybe you can lead us through that, Camille.
Sure. So the first or most recent tax list for this area of around Kazarabat for the family that we talked about earlier, so was in 1886. So this is too early to have Asganush, our original starting person from before. However, it is the perfect time to find her mother as a child in her father's household, along with siblings. So here we we find the household of Ivaz and his various children. The 1886 tax list or census is really important because it lists not only the names of the people in the household, both male and female, and it includes the ages of the people in the household. So using these ages, you can approximate when the people would have been born, giving you a nice family structure to build from. Additionally, the tax lists can be used to track people over time. So they're not always neatly spaced, like the US Census, for example, which is taken every 10 years. Instead, they're a bit more sporadic. So you have them in 1886, you have them in 1873, 1859, 1852, and 1842. So as you can see, they're kind of spread out, but there are numbers that help you track the households because it will say, here's the household, and it will list the number in 1886, and then it will say in the previous tax list, they're in house, whatever house number that they're in. So you can use them to track the family fairly quickly over time, which really helps you to identify them. However, the 1886 lists and the 1842 lists are the only ones that list the females by name. The other lists, so for in between, only list the males by name and then will only give a number of how many females are also in the household. So those can be a little tricky in that way, but overall, they're fantastic for setting you up for success to give you an outline of the family, and then using the metrical books or the church records to link in to get the specifics of the family, as well as finding additional family members that may have died between the tax lists.
Thank you again, Camille, for sharing these fascinating examples that I am sure many will find relevant. I hope you found this useful in your own Armenian family history research, and if you have a question for a future episode, please send it to hyroots@haidenic.com.